Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
You already know what we are talking about today. What a day it was yesterday for the Georgia Bulldogs, capping off the number one recruiting class, the class of 2024, with one of the most fun sort of signing day flips I think we've seen in quite some time. KJ Bolden in the mix for UGA. The long-standing recruiting battle that Georgia had waged on a number of fronts finally came to a conclusion yesterday with Bolden making his pledge and then ultimately signing his letter of intent on his way officially now to the University of Georgia. Now, I'll tell you this real quick. We obviously had a great time covering this for you on DawgNation yesterday. This was one of those deals where, I was kind of on guard for anything. It's kind of interesting to talk to people kind of behind the scenes on something like this, and people who, I always talk about those who kind of know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. It's always interesting when the people who kind of know those sorts of people start to wonder, well, the people that I know who know people who know what's going on and all that kind of stuff, am I getting accurate information? I know what they're telling me, but is what they're telling me true, and is what they're telling me on the level, and is this all something we all got to, kind of make sense of here? And it's just interesting to watch how yesterday, knowing how full combat the recruiting process can be right here down to the wire, Georgia kind of throwing its own elbows, everybody else trying to do their version of that too. Everybody was just sort of on guard for anything. And if you watch the ceremony there on our DawgNation video channels yesterday, the other thing about the Bolden announcement is it was a little bit, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but there wasn't a great deal of attempt to, make this be all that mysterious. As you're seeing, if you're watching on video, Bolden was wearing the red bow tie, very sharp, dapper, even in the tuxedo style jacket, the red bow tie, the Georgia hat matched that. On the big screen behind him, there was a Georgia graphic highlighting that's the place that he was going, and any kind of mention of the idea that he was a flip away from Florida State, and there had been all this hysteria about Auburn getting in, being a late push, all of that kind of stuff was really very much downplayed. The same thing for his teammate who you see once again watching on video standing next to him, Edric Houston, who really had been thought to perhaps be flipping away from Ohio State, maybe going to Alabama. Once again, there wasn't a whole lot of fanfare around that either. So it's almost like the actual mood leading up to the announcement, it was actually Bryant Appling, the Buford coach, who kind of made the announcement for KJ Bolden. It was all, and this is a great video, by the way, to our team that's kind of putting this together for us. It looks great to see on video all that recap taking place there. But the point is, it was almost so anticlimactic that as you're sitting here in this box of a studio that I live in, I'm sitting here wondering, wait, is this real? Is this it? Or is there going to be like some sort of like Skyrider airplane come flying by in a moment that says, ha ha, we got you. It's just a joke. It's actually going to be so-and-so school. It was almost so little fanfare to the actual announcement that it didn't really match the hysteria of the last, however many months, and certainly the last 24 hours. But nonetheless, it is real. KJ Bolden, Georgia actually kind of wins this recruiting battle. But when you look a little deeper at what went on here, ultimately, it doesn't appear that it was the public committed school, Florida State, that was actually the silver medalist here. It sort of seems like Florida State got left in the dust. We're left to believe that some of the issues around Florida State's future in the ACC may truly have been a little bit of an issue there in that recruitment overall, and it ended up being the two SEC schools, Georgia and Auburn, who were actually in the ultimate trial by combat at the end to see who could emerge victorious for KJ Bolden. And lo and behold, no surprise here, Georgia's been kicking Auburn around for a long time, and they did that again yesterday when it comes to KJ Bolden's overall recruitment. So a very interesting way to end what had certainly been an incredible saga. And, I kind of joked about this on social media. And listen, y'all, I wish I was a better person. Like, I wish that I didn't enjoy, like, spiteful things and kind of – I wish I was just above all of that, but I am not. I am right there in the mud with everybody else, or at least a lot of you, when it comes to stuff like this. And so as a way of, I think, being a little bit happier about the fact that Georgia's got the number one overall class and it's KJ Bolden as a strong punctuation mark to all of that, it certainly seems like yesterday Auburn coach Hugh Freeze, which was sort of the other team making the late push here, he didn't mention KJ Bolden by name, but it certainly seems like there's a very strong possibility that Hugh Freeze was not very happy about how the KJ Bolden recruitment came to an end. And I just think this is fun. I think it's just kind of a funny way. And the truth is, I actually listened to the full Hugh Freeze press conference yesterday. I actually thought he did a pretty good job speaking candidly about the recruiting process. So I don't think Freeze had a bad press conference yesterday, to be completely honest with you. I thought it was actually kind of interesting. He was very open about a few things that sometimes coaches aren't all that open about. But because we're spiteful, because we like twisting the knife, it certainly seems like Hugh Freeze was a little bit bothered by the one that got away from them there late. And this, to me, is funny enough to play for you here. Here is Hugh Freeze referencing, gosh, he told me he's coming, and then all of a sudden he's not. Here's Hugh Freeze from yesterday.
You think you've done all to flip another one, and then all of a sudden he goes another direction. Those you just take them in stride, really. You gave your best, and 2 days ago was told that, I'm coming. And then, today it changes, and, those are always disappointing because you put great effort in theirs.
Yeah, I think a lot of Georgia fans would say there was a time way back in the past that Georgia fans thought Laramie Tunsil was coming to Georgia. All of a sudden he takes a visit to Ole Miss, and boy, everything changed after that. So, this idea that, the whole point of hiring Hugh Freeze at Auburn is supposed to be this is a coach that knows his way around the SEC and sort of knows in this league when it comes to recruiting, it's not over till it's over. And yet Freeze still, at least to some degree, sounds somewhat surprised by all that, or at least disappointed by all of that. In fact, he went into even more detail at the beginning of the press conference about just how stressful the last 24 hours for him had been. I think this is really funny because he almost wants to sort of pitch it here as if we're assuming this is all about KJ Bolden, that somehow, Georgia was trying to almost do a late night cram session like I did back when I was in school, not studying enough over the course of a semester and trying to get it all done over the course of 1 8 or 10 hour period. It's almost like that's what Hugh Freeze wanted to sell, the KJ Bolden story on, of the fact that Georgia was taking some shortcuts and trying to swoop in late and kind of make up some ground late. That was the at least the pitch that it seemed like Hugh Freeze was trying to make yesterday. Let me let you hear Hugh Freeze again here.
Listen, last night it was there's some schools in this conference that they believe in last night efforts, and you gotta fight, and you gotta hold on, and you gotta stay up all night and play video games and do stuff that's out of my comfort zone, and but you just. There was some late night pushes, and we held on some, and won, and lost one, and people in this conference are good at what they do, and I don't always like what is done, but it's you gotta have plans, and you gotta fight for it.
First of all, can you imagine playing video games with Hugh Freeze? Can you imagine what that must be like? But don't you? Sometimes all you need to know is this. If the Auburn coach is doing a press conference, whoever it might be in any given year, because Auburn changes coaches about every 24 months, so whoever the Auburn coach happens to be in any given year, if he's going to a podium on National Signing Day and if he's saying, I may not always like what's going to get done, but in this league, you've just come to expect it. If that's what the Auburn coach is saying, we would presume perhaps Georgia's one of the schools that he's referencing there, that means somebody around UGA, somebody in Athens is doing something right. If the Auburn coach is that upset on National Signing Day, that means that somebody at Georgia is doing something right. In this particular case, it would be Kirby Smart. Now, here's where I want to kind of pivot the conversation for a moment, because obviously while there is some sort of fun and sort of spitefulness around the disappointment in Hugh Freeze's voice, we've gotten used to hearing that a little bit lately, but while there's some fun and sort of spiteful enjoyment in all of that, the contrast here is obvious, because while Hugh Freeze is like, well, Lord, I just guess they just swooped in right there at the last minute, and I guess Kirby Smart just played video games with him all night long, and therefore they were able to come in there and win that recruitment battle. Like that's the way that Hugh Freeze would sort of sell all of that. But what Kirby Smart says, and I don't even think that Smart was even maybe all that aware of what Hugh Freeze had maybe said earlier in the afternoon, if it even was earlier. I'm not even all that familiar with what the timeline was. Kirby Smart did go relatively late in the evening yesterday. But the point is that Kirby Smart told you the actual truth about how it is that Georgia won the KJ Bolden recruitment. Not just against Auburn, who kind of swooped in late, but against Florida State, who had had the public commitment for months and months and months. How is it that Georgia kind of remained a factor in all of this, and how is it that Georgia actually ended up winning this recruiting battle? I think this is actually really good from Kirby Smart. It's a slightly longer clip than I would sometimes play, but it is, I think, very illustrative, to use a big word, of exactly what Georgia does to win battles like this, whether it's the late, exciting, last-minute flip or the guy that kind of pledges right before, he begins his senior season, sort of normal fashion. These are the ways in which Georgia wins recruiting battles like this. This is very strong stuff from Kirby Smart. Take a listen.
I mean, we did what we do on every kid. I mean, we recruited. I met KJ Bolden and his mom his ninth grade year in the indoor and sat and talked to him for 45 minutes and just had a great appreciation for her and him. He was a young kid then, and he actually had worked out at our campus a wideout, and we knew that he was a really talented young man. And from that point on, I mean, I bet he's been on this campus 20 or 30 times between coming over here for different events and 7-on-7s, but there was no different recruitment for KJ. It was just consistent and a mutual respect, probably is the right word. I reached out to him when he committed elsewhere and just told him I had a lot of respect for him and we weren't going to stop recruiting him and that we thought this was the best place for him. And I've always learned, Andrew Thomas's parents taught me that consistency is the key, and we were very consistent every time he was here. And then, you know what? It worked out. It doesn't always work out, but it worked out in this case, and we're not going to change our method we go about things.
Hey, DawgNation, stop me if you've heard this before, but we had a little bit of a technical issue today that prevented us from finishing the show. So sorry about that, but we did switch over to a different format. We had a chance to talk to Terrance Edwards, so we hope you enjoy that, and we hope you are enjoying the fact that Georgia, once again, on top of the recruiting rankings, and thanks for being here with us on DawgNation Daily today. Terrance looking good. I didn't expect to be on camera today, but when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, and Terrance Edwards is clearly already ready. So, Terrance, what a great day it was for Georgia, the number one recruiting class. What impressed you about what you got a chance to see?
I really like the secondary that Kirby and company had to opportunity to sign. I've watched DeMello Jones for a few years now, known about him for a while since he's down in the area that I grew up in. And I just really like the secondary additions as the linebackers additions and the D-line, most important. I think the D-line was probably our weakest link this year. With Jordan Hall from last year, like the group, especially defensively, that Kirby and company was able to get. And I know everyone wants to talk about the quarterback position, but I've went and watched Ryan Pozlowski quite a bit, and I really, really think this guy is a very similar skill set to Carson Beck. So I really like his upside, and I really like that he stuck by Georgia. Doesn't matter who they had in this class for the quarterback position, he didn't waver, and that's the type of kid I want on the Georgia Bulldogs.
You mentioned DeMello Jones a moment ago, and there's been a lot of chatter about Ellis Robbins with a good reason. Obviously, everybody's excited about KJ Bolden today. But gosh, Terrance, and I know you still have a lot of great memories of this state championship week last week at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Of all the Georgia guys, or even like names we had one point in time, kind of connect, elite recruits that kind of played in that event over the course of 3 days, I'm not quite so sure how many players were individually more impressive to me than when DeMello Jones was. And, obviously they've been aware of him kind of coming out of Waynesboro, but I don't know that I'd watched him that closely until that state championship game. And my gosh, DeMello Jones is a big-time athlete. I know Kirby yesterday kind of talked about, the speed that exists for Georgia with these secondary additions they're bringing in. Man, DeMello Jones is a really good-looking athlete. I really think even on a class that includes a guy like Ellis Robbins, which obviously, he has no shortage of admirers, man, I think there's a chance that DeMello Jones ends up having a very bright future at UGA.
I think so. I've watched the kid, and I think he's special with the ball in his hand. So I hope there's some opportunity offensively for the kid, maybe some return game for the kid. So I really think the kid upside is very high. I like the three corners that we brought in. All three guys can run. So I really like the speed that we added in the secondary, and we all know what KJ Bolden brings to the table. And I would like to see KJ play some star position as well. I think he feels good enough in the box, and I think he has the cover ability as well. So I hope he gets an opportunity to play there as well. But I just think that the crew that we brought in is very fast. I mean, if you just look at Chris Cole, I really like him a lot. Long, athletic linebacker out of Virginia who can absolute run. We know Jester Williams can run. So it's all about bringing in size and speed.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't know what Tyke Smith's future is going to be. I guess, technically could come back. It's weird. Almost every Georgia player could come back, with the exception, I believe, of Tramel Walthour. But the point is that I think it's interesting to hear you mention the idea that KJ Bolden could play star, because that to me seems like one of those things too of, Georgia fans are hoping that Javon Bullard returns. We know Malachi Starks, we would presume, is going to come back here. That if you're looking for that immediate playing time for a guy like KJ Bolden, Stark could kind of be it. And I guess there's a chance that Janelle Aguero is part of that conversation too. And don't forget, Janelle Aguero was also this time a year ago a big time safety prospect. But I love the idea of him potentially playing star because I think he could be a good fit there, but also couldn't that end up being a good early opportunity for playing time, just given what Georgia may still have at the safety spot? Did we lose you, Terrance? You got me on that?
Yeah, I lost you.
I said the idea that Star could be a good chance for some early playing time for KJ Bolden, perhaps.
Yes, I heard the first part about KJ and him having an opportunity to play star. I really like him at the star position or free. I think he has the range to cover from hash to hash if we get into a single safety look. But I just think his football IQ just going to set some apart along with. So if Tyke doesn't come back, we shortage of talent to compete for that job.
What about the idea that the Buford, so-called Buford curse came to an end yesterday? This is, kind of a big deal to a lot of fans. Even some Georgia staffers had made mention of this a little bit. I mean, it's obviously a very talent-rich program. Now, you've got your own 7A, very talent-rich program. So I know that you guys probably think of Buford as a little bit of a rival. But in terms of a place that produced a lot of major college prospects, a lot of Georgia fans had kind of wondered when their chance was going to be to kind of get back in on some of that. What did you make of the idea that finally and officially the so-called Buford curse came to an end yesterday for Georgia?
Well, if there was a curse, I think we probably got the best player out of the Buford school system as well. I think Tim Wansley might have something to say about that. One of my teammates that I think is probably the best Buford player to ever come out of Buford. But KJ's up there with Tim Wansley. So if the curse had to be lifted, I think we got one of the better players for it to be lifted. I honestly thought I've known KJ for a long time. He has trained with me. I know the family. I know Keisha. I know the mom. I know everyone very well. I've just always thought he was going to end up as a Bulldog. So when he committed to Florida State, that was shocking to me because I just thought he would end up as a Dog, and he did. So this is not surprising to me. No inside information. I just know how they felt about the Bulldogs, and it ended up that he did sign with the Bulldogs, and this is what I thought all along.
How valuable is it? Kirby talked yesterday about spending 45 minutes with KJ and his mom, when he was in ninth grade coming to a camp. And when Kirby has a relationship that starts like that and he takes 20 whatever visits, that it was, when you have a long-standing relationship built over a period of years, and this because, you were a great recruit, your brother was a great recruit, and you've also worked with great recruits here right now. When a program really invests that kind of time, it's not like a last-minute thing. It's not a, hey, we'll throw a bunch of money at you. It's about, we really believe in you as a man, as a growing young man. We really believe in you, and we're going to invest our time in you. How much does that matter, and how much does that pay off when it comes to recruiting overall?
I think it does. You just look at it, Brandon. After the Alabama game, I think Kirby made it his point to go up and speak to Caleb Downs. So the relationship that they built, these young men, don't change because they didn't sign with your school or they did sign with your school late. These are real relationships that people cultivate throughout this whole recruitment process, and you spend a lot of time getting to know these kids, getting to understand these kids. And I think you just saw it on display when Kirby made his point to go.
You mentioned Caleb Downs, and I think a lot of Georgia fans, I would say I'm kind of in this category. I'm sort of hoping that KJ Bolden kind of proves to be the 2024 version of what Caleb Downs was in 2023. A guy that was dynamic on both sides of the ball. You talk to people around the state, they'll say, yeah, there's a little bit of a, kind of a player comparison there. Like, what do you make of the idea that, listen, Downs left the state of Georgia a year ago, arguably became best freshman in the country here this year for what he did for Alabama. What kind of comparison would you make between a KJ Bolden and a Caleb Downs here right now?
You can see the talent. You can see the talent that they possess is the football IQ. And the most important thing, I think, the trait that Kirby looks at the most, and do you love football? And I think both of those guys just love football through and through. And you see a lot of talented guys, but they don't love football. And I think KJ is one of those guys that is a Kirby type guy because he loves football. And I think he can make the impact that Caleb has. Yes, we have two guys that's coming back. That's hopefully Javon Biller and Malachi Starks. Kirby and company will find a role for KJ to make an impact. If it's special teams, it's the returning kicks, he will find a role for that young man because he's too good of a football player not to.
In the time we have left, you were talking about Ryan Puglisi a little earlier, the Georgia quarterback commit. This is a guy that a lot of Georgia fans have kind of reconsidered in light of what happened with Dylan Raiola. Talk to me a little bit more about what you have seen when you've seen Puglisi on film.
I think I don't know the young man. I'm going to speak about what the intangibles. And the intangibles that I've seen that he did not blink an eye this whole recruiting process.
Yeah.
He stuck with the Dogs. He knew the Dogs believed in him. I know that Georgia and company was up front with the young man, that they was going to take two quarterbacks, and he didn't shy away from competition. He didn't care who the second quarterback was. He was coming to Georgia to compete for a job. And we could talk about his skill set. We could talk about all that. But what I want everyone to know about this young man, he never wavered. So I believe that he believed in the program. And things work out in mysterious ways where he's probably going to be the only scholarship quarterback that they take. And Georgia didn't waver from him, and he didn't waver from Georgia. And that's the type of stuff that I want my quarterback to be made of.
I thought it was really interesting yesterday. Kirby Smart kind of talked about some of that kind of stuff too, that this is a guy that seems to understand that he has a chance to develop at Georgia. You almost wonder moving forward if that's going to be a more valuable aspect of the recruiting process of, am I bringing in someone that has sort of a realistic appraisal of their chances to play right away? And, is this one of those things where, like, if I bring in a guy that has to play right away or he's not going to be happy, then that may not be a good fit for my program. But for a guy like Ryan Puglisi, who knows that there's an entrenched starter, and a guy like Gunnar Stockton's perhaps been here longer, he gets a chance to learn from them the way that Carson Beck once did. It seems like, to use a word that you used and Kirby Smart also used yesterday, there are some intangible characteristics that perhaps make Ryan Puglisi even more to like about him, even though he obviously got a big, strong arm and he's a good athlete. It sort of seems like there's some of the intangible characteristics that could benefit him and benefit Georgia too while he's here.
Oh, I think so. I think when you got a guy that's willing to wait and willing to learn and understands that I don't have to be the guy day one. Ryan understands that Carson is going to be number one. Brock is probably going to be number two in spring, and he's probably going to be number three along with the other quarterbacks. So he has an opportunity to go in there and learn about college football, learn the playbook, understands what college football is all about. Adjust to the speed of the game, adjust to the talent that he's going to be around him. He's going to get opportunity to face one of the best defenses in college football day in and day out. And I think that's invaluable, more than money, more than anything that you could get. And I've known I want these kids to get everything that's coming to them. But I also understand that the short game versus the long game, I think Ryan is playing the long game.
This is obviously a personal question, but was there any chat around Milton about LT Overton? Went to Alabama, obviously a former Milton player, reclassified, went to Texas A&M. Now he's on his way to Alabama. I think a lot of Georgia fans were hoping they may be able to get involved with an elite defensive lineman like that, but, without very much fanfare at all. It seems like Overton's on his way to Alabama. Any kind of chat around the halls there in Milton about, what Overton did and the fact that, he seemed to be on his way to Alabama without a whole lot of consideration very much of anywhere else?
Not at all. I know he was at the game, so he came to the game to support the Milton Eagles, and there wasn't any chatter, just about he got into the portal and the teams that he visited. I think he visited South Carolina, he visited Alabama. I think those are probably the only two teams that he visited that I heard of. So there wasn't much chatter around the facility. I think we was locked in on trying to win the 7A state championship.
I'll give you one more here. We'll let you go. The two receivers that Georgia signs in this class. I know you and I talked about London Humphreys a little bit last week, but Nitro Tuggle sticks with Georgia. That's a pretty big deal. Sokovia White's a guy that is obviously not as highly rated as a recruit, but a player I've seen in person many times. I've really grown to really like him a lot. I think he's talking about intangibles. I believe that Sokovia White's got a lot of those for UGA. How about the two receivers that Georgia signed officially? Nitro Tuggle, a pretty big recruiting battle to hold on to him. Sokovia White, a guy who I think has a lot of, really big-time leadership qualities that could come to the forefront here in the future. What do you like about Sokovia and Nitro?
Well, Sokovic, because I know him personally, seen him throughout especially 707 playing with Hustling. I could tell people this is my comp for him. I think he's a football player. Yes, he is 5'9", 5'10", not the biggest, not the fastest, but he can play football. He has the explosiveness that you're looking for a guy who's not 6'2". And I can tell you this, I think he's a better version of Kearis Jackson. Not as big as Kearis, but a better version, a guy that's going to come in and do everything that you're asked to do. But Georgia faithful, you're going to be very surprised about how athletic this young man is. He has long arms that you're looking for, so his catch rate is very high. He's tough, and I think he's going to be the guy that really commands the slot position. Nitro Tuggle is a guy that I've talked about and spoke about having the same traits as A.D. Mitchell. I think he has the wiggle after the catch. He's twitchy, and he can make people miss in the open field. If you just go and look at his huddle, he has a lot of kick returns for touchdown. So he has the ability to run out the catch. So I really like the two receivers that we brought in.
Really good stuff to hear, Terrance. I appreciate you doing this in a little bit different format here today. Always great to have you. I know folks will be checking out online, Terrance Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. You can give folks a reminder there on all of that. And obviously, we'll look forward to talking to you again in kind of a normal format again here very soon. But remind folks that they can catch up with you online.
Right, as I see my name down here, BA right there. Somebody had it with an A earlier, but they changed it and put it with an E. So they got it fixed. But if you're looking for any kind of training, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrance Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrance, really good stuff. Always appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. We'll look forward to talking to you soon, okay?
Thank you.
Good stuff there from Terrance Edwards. A little bit different type of format here today, but we are certainly happy to have him. And just really glad to be able to get his thoughts there on UGA. So obviously, if you're kind of joining us in the middle of the show or something like that, you see it's not the shows you've come to expect. We, of course, appreciate our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible, but this is not obviously what we're certainly used to. So here's what we're going to do. As a way of just kind of making the best of the situation, a lot of comments rolling in on the recruiting stuff. You heard some thoughts from Terrance there on that. I'm just going to kind of give you my own thoughts here, basically reacting to what you put in the comment section. I'll read your questions. We'll talk about it. We'll kind of look at the landscape over all of this. In addition to a number one overall class for Georgia, which included the exciting flip of KJ Bolden yesterday, you got a lot of drama around the Florida program where they kind of dropped like a stone from like outside the top five, inside the top five, and kind of outside the top 15 before it's all said and done. There was a lot of drama with Jeremiah Smith yesterday, nation's number one prospect. Seems like Alabama did some good work there late, obviously kind of maintain their status, as you've come to expect year after year, as an overall elite class. So kind of all of that's on the table, and you can just sort of pop up and tell me what you thought and what you noticed, and we'll kind of do all of that here right now. So a lot of folks having sort of, a good time with our situation here right now. Charles Dalton says this running back room is about to be really special, back to the UGA standard. And I do believe in terms of, what mattered most for Georgia in this 2024 class, bringing in 3 running backs, obviously a big deal. I think that Nate Frazier is, from my, perspective, as good a running back prospect as Georgia has brought in quite some time. I think that's a chance that's a guy that could be, a real sort of featured dude for you at some point in time in the future. I think that Dwight Phillips, while he's a very different kind of player, and Kirby Smart alluded to this yesterday during his press conference, while he's a very different kind of player, ultimately that's one of those situations where I think that Georgia probably needed to just get faster in general on offense. Find a way to kind of bring in that speed and be really creative about how you want to use that speed. I think that Dwight Phillips gives them a chance to do that. But when you think about what a Frazier could be, when you think about, the return to health of a guy like Branson Robinson, probably a little bit of an injury recovery taking place for him next year. But still, there's a lot to like about what Georgia has in its running back room right now. And I do believe that the 3 running backs they bring in as part of this 2024 class can obviously be a big part of that. Of all the Georgia assistants, I would say that Dell McGee had one of the better days overall with this class kind of coming to fruition there yesterday. Jabril Hill says, what is our current situation at quarterback? Kirby did, reference the possibility that Georgia might still look to add a quarterback here. He says that they are below quota, whatever word that he used. They want 4 scholarship quarterbacks right now. They're only going to have 3. They did bring another preferred walk-on in. You're aware of that, the Perry quarterback. had a really good season, bringing him in as a preferred walk-on. But Georgia wants 4 quarterbacks at the scholarship level. Right now, they're only set to have 3: Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, and Ryan Puglisi. Now, at one point in time, you kind of wondered, well, could a Malik Murphy from Texas, could that be a guy that perhaps is sort of an insurance policy now that Dylan Raio's not coming? Based on the recent chatter as of late, you see some scheduled visits for Murphy. Those are all visits elsewhere other than Georgia. It seems like the Murphy thing probably right now was only kind of a kick the tires type situation. Doesn't seem like right now there's anything much more substantive than that when it comes to Georgia and Malik Murphy. So if you're looking for the kind of quarterback that Georgia might be looking to bring in, I believe maybe it's kind of below that level of the sort of Malik Murphy guy that earned some buzz, back up at a place like Texas, started some here this year, beat out Arch Manning. The kind of quarterback that Georgia might be able to bring in for the role they'd want that quarterback to play is kind of probably below that Malik Murphy standard. I'm going to tell you this right now. I am personally very excited about the idea that Gunnar Stockton is Georgia's backup here for 2024. I believe that Stockton can have the kind of year that looked like Brock Vandagriff was on his way to having, learning from an entrenched starter like Carson Beck and getting better in that process. And that's what Beck had done, back in 2022. Once again, waiting the wings, getting those backup snaps, kind of absorbing the information. Sometimes you learn by watching, as much as you learn by doing. And I believe the opportunity that awaits Gunnar Stockton there on that, I think is incredibly valuable. Stockton is a guy that I'd have a pretty big bet on when it comes to the future at UGA. Nothing's a given, nothing's a guarantee, and I certainly am not going to make any of those guarantees to you here right now. But I do believe that Gunnar Stockton can have a very bright future. So while Georgia might want another scholarship quarterback, I don't believe they should, at least best that I can tell, I don't feel like they should feel any kind of panic about, you got to bring in somebody to kind of be the backup to Carson Beck. You may bring somebody in, there may be a competition. Maybe he wins that competition and earns the right to be the backup. But as it stands right now, I think that Gunnar Stockton has a very good chance to be, and perhaps very deserving of being, the backup next year, and perhaps the guy waiting in the wings after that here at UGA. Trap 323 also talking about the idea that Gunner's going to be a senior there in 2025. And this is a guy that, look, the Georgia quarterback plan has just gotten a lot more sensible in recent years. There was a time in which Georgia quarterback was pretty weird. You had weirdness with JT Daniels. You had weirdness with Jamie Newman. You had weirdness with Justin Fields, guys that you hope to have here for a while and, for whatever reason, just didn't quite work out. Well, after all of that weirdness and sort of unpredictable drama, all of a sudden now you're talking about a situation where Stetson Bennett was a starter and he gave way to Carson Beck. Carson Beck is now a starter and perhaps he's going to give way to the next guy. It seems like there's just a much more sensible quarterback plan in place where all of a sudden Georgia, the last couple of years, has not only liked its starting quarterback, but I think it's also been pretty comfortable with its quarterback depth overall. And that, I believe, is a really good thing. Nature Gator on the subject of some of those Florida decommits that Amaris Williams left because L.J. McRae is coming. I think that's probably a little bit of copium on the part of Nature Gator, but we're always glad to have him here on this. Jonathan Aaron says, how many more kids do we have besides Beck with the COVID year left? I don't know that I can answer that, but my understanding is there was only one Georgia player. Now, some of y'all are smarter than me on stuff like this, and so you may tell me different. My understanding is there was only one Georgia player that definitely, without a doubt, no opportunity, could not come back for 2024, and that was Tramel Walthour, I believe. I believe he was the only one that had no eligibility. Everybody else, either because of a red shirt or a COVID or just because they're just, young enough, everybody else could have returned. The weird thing about Beck is because of the COVID year, he technically could return in 2025 if he wanted to. And he's already said he's not going to do that in his overall message. He said he's coming back for one more year, but technically he could return in 2025 if he wanted to, because he does have that COVID year, but he's not going to because he technically has COVID plus red shirt. But I don't believe that's the case of anything that he would end up doing there on that. So the COVID year has made some of the evaluation, some of this kind of stuff, a little bit more difficult to do because of all of that. Rodriguez Smith wondering about NFL rumors and Kirby Smart. That's not coming from anywhere real. I can promise you that. That's not coming from anywhere real. William Perry says, who's your favorite player in this recruiting class? So let me give you, let me try to answer that this way, in that a guy that I've really grown to like in this class is a guy like, say, Daniel Calhoun. Because, like, obviously you very easily gravitate towards one of the players that you think might play right away or have a chance to make an early contribution. This is KJ. This is Justin Williams. This is Joseph Jonah-Janye. This may be Nate Frazier. This may be Ellis Robinson. Those are kind of the early impact guys, but they get already a lot of the attention. I like what Georgia's done along the offensive line. I like the fact that Georgia went out and got big guys on the offensive line. This is a little bit of a scarce year for overall offensive line talent. So Georgia sort of bet big on big guys. Now, Kirby Smart also told you yesterday, some of those guys need to get a little bit smaller and lighter. And I believe with, sort of professional nutrition, they'll be able to do that. But kind of an avatar for a group that I like overall, William is a guy like Calhoun, because I always think you get an interesting evaluation of a player when you evaluate him on the opposite side of the ball from what he's going to play in college. And I saw some real toughness and some athleticism, I think, from Daniel Calhoun playing on the defensive line for Walton. Now, Walton ultimately ended up coming a game short of winning a state championship. Credit to Terrance Edwards and Milton who got that done. But in watching Walton this year in a season that almost resulted in the state championship, I saw a ton from Calhoun on the offensive line that really made him, kind of a dominant force. But when you see him on the defensive line there too, you sort of saw that little nastiness, that little edge that you want a guy like that to have. I like Calhoun a lot. I really do. Spencer Clark mentioning Ladd McConkey perhaps coming back. And because of the format we're doing it in, all these comments come to the same place. So a lot of these are like flying in very quick. So if I'm missing your comment, I'm not ignoring you. It's just the format's a little bit different here right now in terms of me seeing the comments. And so therefore they're all coming very fast. And so I only see, I only see yours for a few seconds, then it's gone. But Spencer mentions Ladd McConkey there on that. And, I guess the smart money on Ladd is that he's still maybe more likely to leave than not. But I do think there has to be a consideration for, are you sure you want to do that? Is there some chance, given the chance to catch touchdowns from Carson Beck, that you might consider coming back? And I'll tell you, this is one of those decisions for me that I would really, really root for, because I think one of the big questions to answer for Georgia for this upcoming year is, how do you replace the numbers that Brock Bowers provided? Now, there's a spiritual leadership there. There's just a good vibe situation there, that there's, some clear intangible characteristics involved with replacing a guy like Brock Bowers. But there's also just some basic math to this. It's how do you replace those numbers? I always like the movie Moneyball, and that's one of the things that Billy Bean's character, the Brad Pitt character, Brad Pitt's character Billy Bean, it kind of talks about in this movie. It's like, the old school A's, you're not replacing Jason Giambi and, guys like that. You're replacing Johnny Damon. You're replacing the numbers, the stats that they put up. You're trying to replace that production. And there's an element, while Brock Bowers is a living, breathing human being and is a guy that I think will be revered as one of the greatest players in program history, from a football standpoint in 2024, there's also a stat line that you've got to physically, tangibly replace. And obviously the return of Ladd McConkey would make that so much easier to do. Let's see what else. Spencer Clark says that Dylan Bell could replace Ladd. I do believe that Spencer is possibly onto something there on that McConkey makes replacing Bowers easier, but no one's a full-on straight replacement for that. But the emergence of more from Dylan Bell, and I do believe that Bell's got to be a big part of Georgia's plans here going forward. The emergence of the emergence of a guy like that is a place where some of that production could perhaps come from. G. Gray says that Malik Murphy should commit to South Carolina or Duke. He's going to be a standout player. I like him as a prospect too, G. Gray. So let me ask you all this. I'm having a hard time remembering this. Where is KJ Jefferson going? At one point in time, there had been some chatter that KJ might go to South Carolina. I thought that might be a good fit for South Carolina. Did KJ Jefferson ever announce where he might be going? Let me see if I can look this up and talk at the same time. KJ Jefferson, maybe not yet for KJ, right? But I think that South Carolina would have been a good fit for KJ Jefferson. Jonathan Aaron says, I was watching the McAfee show yesterday, and they talked about UGA flipping KJ Bolden. That's really cool. And like, some of y'all don't care anything about media, and I totally get that. But I've always been really interested in media. Some of y'all, that's the grossest thing you can imagine. But I've always been really interested in media. And from a recruiting standpoint, it's sort of interesting about what cuts through the clutter with media and what doesn't. And if KJ Bolden commits to Georgia in July, no one's talking about that. But when that announcement's made on signing day like that, when it's the big flip, and I think KJ had done a really good job of cultivating interest in his eventual decision, when something like that happens then, well, you do get more attention and a very like mainstream show. I know that, McAfee's on College Game Day, but this is not a diehard college football guy. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't love him on game day, because he's not, a part of our community 365 days out of a year. But for a very mainstream guy who's sort of speaking to a mainstream audience that's arguing about LeBron and Jordan, 90% of the time, when you've got a very mainstream audience like that, to have some Georgia football talk and a signing day discussion about flipping KJ Bolden, that gives you an idea of why these sort of last minute moves really matter. Let's see what else. Somebody asked about the Georgia class being complete. I really don't know what's even going to be left over for February. I mean, obviously you got, 2 more days of early signing period, but this is one of the reasons why people want to change the calendars, because the idea of the early signing period, and, it begins on Wednesday, but it stretches through Friday. I mean, the truth is, for all intents and purposes, the Wednesday of the early signing period is what the old school national signing day was. So let's let the dust clear and let's see what's still out there. Obviously, the benefit of any high school recruits who are still left over is you can still chase them beyond this early portal window. The portal window ends, January 4th? That's the date the early portal window ends. So if there's any high-level high school talent left over, the benefit to that is you just have longer to chase after those guys, because you get a second chance at them come February. Crow King 123 mentioned the Jeremiah Smith stuff. The Jeremiah Smith situation yesterday was fascinating, and ultimately he ends up staying with Ohio State. But there was the moment in the Ryan Day press conference. I'm not like making fun of Day. We'll do that on a different day. But Ryan Day was like on his press conference, sort of breathing the sigh of the relief of like, woo, held on to Jeremiah Smith. But then the letter of intent didn't come in, and that thing dragged on for a while. Look, Miami made the push late. I would say there's a little bit of an interesting, perhaps weird vibe around Ohio State right now. I don't know they have robust NIL apparatus working for them. I think they had to work really hard yesterday to keep Jeremiah Smith, to keep Edric Houston there as well. There's a little bit of a weird vibe around that here right now. Somebody had mentioned Trevor Etienne a little earlier. I see Nature Gator talking about him. I do believe that Georgia can be, and I assume they probably are, a pretty big factor in Trevor Etienne. There's Etienne, Colby Young, the Miami wide receiver, the South Carolina, Xavier McLeod, the South Carolina defensive lineman. I'm sort of led to believe that Georgia's a pretty big factor in all of those. Now, when you get to like some of the bigger names, I don't have much, listen, somebody else may have the inside scoop on that, and I'll let them, report whatever they want to on that. I just can't personally speak to that myself. It seems like on the basis of sort of what I've personally heard, that level of transfer like Etienne or a Colby Young or a McLeod, those could certainly be very real ads here. Yeah, Kyle Bowie asked about Evan Stewart. I mean, and I hope I pronounced your last name, Kyle, correctly. He asked about Evan Stewart. I don't have anything personally on Stewart. I don't know. I mean, I think that Stewart's a really, really, really good player. Stewart himself has said that, perhaps he didn't make as much money on NIL as some people think that he did. So maybe the bargaining opportunity for Stewart's a little bit more reasonable than you might expect. Perhaps that's the case. I don't know. I don't personally have anything for you, though, on Evan Stewart. That's not a connection that I'm able to personally make right now as it relates to Georgia, but I would certainly love it if it's true, but I don't have anything for you on that being true. When it comes to, like, by comparison, a guy like London Humphreys, there was tons of chatter on that. Lots of very, very substantial connection behind the scenes between George and Humphreys. Very easy for anybody who was really, kind of watching that closely to see that was a very real thing, very strongly likely to happen. The same kind of roots aren't growing in my eyes right now when it comes to Georgia and Everett Stewart, but I would certainly love that to change. Cousin Eddie on the subject of the Georgia defensive line. He says, look, I don't think it was a great year for Georgia defensively. And the front seven is one of those areas when you would have liked for that to have been better. That's just true. That, Georgia had gotten used to life with maybe the best defense in the country. 2021, best defense of all time. 2022, it may have still been very close to the best defense in the country. 2023, not quite that same level. And life is harder when you don't have great defense. It really is. Georgia had, I don't know what whatever the level above good but below great is, Georgia was probably that, sort of an 80th, 90th percentile type defense. But Georgia had really benefited from what the soccer guys call a clean sheet, going out there and just sort of eliminating any chance for success of the opposing offense. That's not quite the eraser that the Georgia defense was in 2023. So better up front would be a really nice thing for Georgia in 2024. One of the things we're going to do, hopefully when the studio's all fixed and things like that, is really talk about how those building block pieces come together. The growth maturity of a guy like Christian Miller, the emergence of a guy like Jordan Hall, the return of a guy like Nas Stackhouse or Warren Brinson, veterans coming back, plus young guys stepping up, plus maybe a transfer portal ad. All of a sudden, that becomes the building blocks. Nothing being guaranteed here. And this is not me, pie in the sky, sort of selling you on anything being easy, because building a great defensive line is not easy. If it was, everybody would have one. And frankly, there aren't very many teams that have a great defensive line because it's a very scarce position group overall. But you will see a path for Georgia to possibly build a great defensive line. I mean, a truly great defensive line. You will see the pathway for it to possibly happen. And that may be about all we can ask for. All right, a few more comments here. We'll get ready to wrap it up here. DMart42 on the subject of Raylan Wilson. Yeah, so here's my understanding on the Raylan Wilson thing. I think that Wilson gave Georgia a lot of, good snaps when he had a chance to play. And we all know this. This is just true. He totally froze up on that one Alabama touchdown. That just happened, right? But, this is a guy that I think his future is no less bright because of that. He was in the game as a freshman right there. Georgia had dealt with some injuries, and he was in the game. And listen, I think that Raylan Wilson is still a guy you very much want on your team, despite the fact that there was obviously, kind of my understanding is that Georgia was sort of ready for that play, had been very, very well sort of scouted and prepared for that play. And sometimes the communication between, coaching staff and, very, very young player, not always not always the smoothest. And in this particular case, it seems like Wilson just sort of froze up on whatever he was trying to do in terms of spotting that particular play, something that Georgia apparently had pretty well scouted, at least I'm led to believe. So that doesn't make me hate Raylan Wilson. I hate that moment. I hate that it happened. But do you want Raylan Wilson on your team going forward? You 1,100,000% absolutely do. Paul Moon and the subject of true edge guys for Georgia. I'm going to tell you right now, I feel like, for the most part, we do a very positive show because for the most part, things around Georgia are typically very, very positive. The one thing that I do sort of wish that Georgia would show some tremendous improvement on, in fact, I've been, kind of preaching this a little bit. I do believe that Georgia needs to be a little bit better with that position we now sort of call the edge rusher. And, I probably made a bigger deal about Marvin Jones' transfer than other people did, and probably made a bigger deal about the Jones transfer than almost any transfer that Georgia has sustained. It seems like by production and status, Jamon Dumas-Johnson leaving is probably the bigger overall deal for UGA. But in terms of what I believe the eventual perception could be, you don't want a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. to leave and go do what Jermaine Johnson did, which is have much greater production in a place like Florida State. You just don't want that to occur. Now, I'm not saying I root against Marvin Jones Jr. I'm saying it's not to Georgia's benefit to have that happen, because in 2021, when Jermaine Johnson's leading the ACC in sacks, becoming a first-round pick, nobody at Georgia cared because there were 5 first-round picks in this defense. But you get this sense that if it happens again, if Jones Jr. were to do something similar to what Jermaine Johnson did, maybe he won't, because what Jermaine Johnson did was truly very difficult to do. But even if Jones Jr. goes there and just raises his production, even if that's all it is, if that's what this ends up being, then I do think it will perhaps be a little bit more noticeable in 2024 because it's not the same comparison of Georgia defense anymore. So what a guy like Jones Jr. does somewhere else probably, will earn just more attention. So for all the discussion about Jamon Dumas-Johnson going to Kentucky, I still think the most notable departure is Marvin Jones Jr. going to Florida State for the reasons I just mentioned. Randy Hall says, who do I have ranked as my number one team for next season? I don't know. For me personally, I do believe that Alabama is going to be the preseason number one, whether they win the national championship or not. I believe they will be. But I don't quite know who I would rank number one. I think my category of contenders is somewhere in the vicinity of like Bama is clearly in there. I would say that Georgia's clearly in there. I would say that Texas for me is in there. I would say that Michigan is probably still in there. One of the things to keep your eye on for Ohio State, of the teams that we typically think of as the very best teams, Ohio State may have the easiest schedule. Of like the Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, Texas, of that group, Ohio State may have the easiest schedule. Ohio State does not have the same level of schedule that some of these teams sort of have. I'd also put Oregon in the discussion, not number one overall, but if we're making our shortest list of the true contenders, I'd probably put Oregon in there right now too. So it's probably that group in some order. That is going to indeed be the case. All right, we are going to wrap it up here today. Now, tomorrow, we're just going to do the show like this. So when you see me at like 9:45 or 10 a.m., I'm just going to do it like this. We'll bring on Jeff. We'll talk. We'll be relaxed and casual. And on Monday and Tuesday of not Monday. Monday's Christmas. So Christmas Day, no show at all. Tuesday and Wednesday, we have pre-recorded shows because I'm taking the day off on the 26th. I just need a day off, y'all. I love my job, but I need a day off. And the 27th, I'm traveling to Miami. And so here's what the next few days of shows are going to look like. It'll be like this tomorrow. On Tuesday and Wednesday, it'll look like normal, but it won't be live. And on Thursday and Friday, it will be live, but it won't look like normal because we'll be there in Miami. And then game days next Saturday, believe it or not, kind of a regular, normal game day Saturday, which I'm really, really looking forward to. That's, in fact, one of the things we're going to talk about in some of our shows next week is the fact that finally it sort of feels like there's some real legitimate Orange Bowl excitement. So we'll look forward to doing that with you then. All right, thanks for being here. I'm actually, normally this would be doing our RS Andrews cool down. I'm actually about to have lunch with Dari Payro, so I'm actually looking forward to that. It's going to be a great time, as always. All right, appreciate y'all. You're always fun to talk to. Signing day is one of those deals where, and especially in the midst of transfer portal, we just sort of have to throw it all out there and just sort of sift it through it and sort of see what it all is. And that'll take a little time to be able to do, but we'll do our best on all of that. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your patience as we're clearly not delivering the show the way that we need to here right now, but I will look for Philip Jordan Wells says we're going to do a closet show there on Friday. Maybe so. I actually don't live in that house anymore, but maybe I may go knock on the door of the house where I used to live. Hey, can I come back to the closet and do the show the way that I used to? May need to do that. Salisha Gagnon, Merry Christmas to you there as well, and to everybody out there around Dog Nation. So have a good day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily. We'll talk to you then.